Hi. Hope is a discipline, and it's really true, especially what we're going to talk about today. And I really, really hope that you'll stay with me long enough to figure this out, because it really is complicated. Okay? Depending on where you are, what's going on in your life is how complicated it is, but it's very complicated. We have a bad situation regarding climate change. We really, really do. I'm going to tell you a little story just to help you understand how and why I know how bad it is. Okay, I've been following climate change for as long as they called it getting hotter or getting colder, or that's what they call it now. Okay, or a different climate or whatever. It really doesn't matter. What matters, in 1962, I was really, really motivated because Silent Spring came out. I had just given birth to a child, and I thought, holy cow, what have I done? Okay, I was raped. I had no choice in the matter, and I was impregnated. But the point is, I was concerned. I was really concerned. But everybody then, so all the scientists told us this situation that we had, that Rachel Carson told us about, that the DDT was killing the birds and it was going to kill the insects, which means we wouldn't have pollination and we wouldn't be able to eat. Okay, that was where she was at that time, or where most of us were at that time. And we were told that until 2100, we had absolutely nothing to worry about. So, okay, I mean, when you hear that, and the same thing goes on today, when you hear people say, oh, no, there's no climate change. Climate is always changing around and doing one thing or another, and there's nothing really to be concerned about. You want to take that as fact because you don't want to be concerned about what's going forward for your kids or your grandkids, or in my case, great-grandkids. You don't want to think about it. And it's easier to accept something that isn't accurate rather than accept something that's true. And what I'm going to talk to you about is accept something that's true, because hope is really a part of your day-to-day, not your long-term, okay? I'm telling you right now that the long-term doesn't look good, but day-to-day does look good, and I'll tell you how we can put that together. I've been an advocate forever. I've talked people's legs off. In 1994, I took off to find a piece of land to live on, to exist on for 5 years after Y2K. The 2000 changed to 200, where my father, who was working on the biggest computer back years ago, told me that 1900 was going to confuse 2000 and it was going to really screw up the computers, and that was going to screw up everything in our world. But what I learned later, my father died in 1986, so he wasn't around then. What I learned later is they spent up to $600 billion fixing that problem in computers. I mean, so often that's the way it happens. Something is not as predicted, or it's over of what's predicted. And that's where this particular video comes into play, because we're dealing here with a situation that is really weird. Okay. Let's see. Okay, for Y2K, we were set up to stay there for 5 years, and supposedly nothing happened. But we did find out later that something did happen, and it was corrected, and everything was okay, and we were able to stay where we were. And we didn't leave there until 2008, I believe. Okay, so we were there about 12 years. Learning what we needed to know about what's coming ahead. I called it trial run, because we learned how to put food up. We practiced all the different things that I've done over the years, this and this and this, but not in one place. Chickens and gardening, and we had to garden above ground because of the caliche, and which is a hard soil. Anyway, it was trial run. Okay, so when it became so obvious to us, I was still at the University of Arizona in 2007 when we were told that college kids and staff were told that 3 colleges were coming together to offer some seminars on climate change. And 75,000 people were invited, and they were allowed to, if they wanted to, bring a spouse. So it was all of the staff, all the students, and bring a spouse if you could. But the $75,000 people was just the University of Arizona, Arizona State University, and Northern Arizona University. So they all came together at University of Arizona, where I was attending school, and I brought my husband. And they were set to have a lot of people. 34 of us showed up, 34 people. We had, I believe, 6, it may have been 8, but I believe we had 6 prominent speakers. The one that intrigued me to no end was John Overpeck, Dr. John Overpeck. He goes by Peck. He spoke about the fact that he was moving from Arizona, and this was in October of 2007. He was going to be moving in the spring to northern, I was either Michigan or Missouri, I don't remember right now. Anyway, they had built a $90 million building to do some more research, but he would not be publishing. And I knew that Dr. Guy McPherson had been terminated. Well, he hadn't been terminated. He told he could sit in his office and do nothing because he was tenured professor. He was the youngest one they'd ever had as a tenured professor. But he could no longer publish, and he could no longer teach because they didn't want him to let students know what was really going on. Sad, huh? I mean, our institutions of higher learning are supposed to tell us the truth. And they said, yeah, we know you're telling the truth, but you can't tell it. It wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at all. Anyway, 34 of us showed up. It was the same day that Al Gore was receiving the environmental award from the Nobel Peace Prize, and Dr. John Overpeck was also being named on that. And he said instead of being at that event, he would rather be with us. Of course, he thought, there'd be a lot of us, but there were only 34. That in itself led me to believe, oh boy. But one of the other speakers said, only 32% of the United States population believes in climate change. 60% of East Indian believe in climate change, and 59% in Mexico. I looked at my husband and said, okay, finish my degree in Mexico. And we did. We headed to Guanajuato, where I had spent a couple of summers, and it was fabulous. I loved it. I loved being there until I found out that the closest neighbor was using Roundup. And we had built a house. My husband had been the supervisor on building a community center, a 3-story tall new community center. We weren't there long enough to finish the 3rd floor. But right now it's 200 children. About 200 children are educated there, and they've been doing that for 16 years. So about 3,500 different kids sometimes the same kid has passed through there, but about 3,500 kids have been educated in that space in the last 16 years because my husband devoted 2 years of his life to putting that together. And we devoted, I think it was about 11 months. We had a family live with us for about 6 months while we rebuilt their home. And we did that in Guanajuato. And that was because we were a nonprofit and we wanted to make a difference in somebody's lives. And their house had caught on fire. Anyway, across the street from them, they were using Roundup. And that was really not the environment I wanted to eat from, or more importantly to me at the time, my husband to be around. So when the doctors said they thought he had had another heart incident, he'd already had surgery twice in 3 different stents in his heart. He'd had 4 strokes and 2 heart attacks. So we came to Ecuador, South America, first on the coast and then later more inland, but at an altitude that they said he would survive at. And it has been helpful. The doctors really thought he would die soon in 2008. And here it is 2026, and he's 85. He's been defined as having 17 diseases, mostly from the exposure in the Vietnam War to Agent Orange. So that news was pretty nasty from John Overpeck, and it was pretty nasty after that to find so many different things going on and people not concerned and nobody really doing anything. And I felt like my legacy had just gone on and on and on and on with no really results. I was hoping things would be different here. Well, they are. It's a lot different here. I live in a area of subsistence farmers who all believe in climate change. Fortunately, I'm not fluent enough in Spanish to discuss it with them, but anytime I mention it, they all go, hmm. And we plant corn. When I was a kid on the farm, we always saw the corn at the same height because everybody planted the corn at the same time, so they could harvest it about the same time, which is why they had such a time with the harvesting products, because you had to share them and rent them, and it was really tough. But it's not that way here. Well, for one thing, they don't have any flat land. You can see behind me, there is no flat land back there. This goes down and back up. No flat land. So they harvest it by hand. And now they plant anytime. Just put corn in the ground. Doesn't matter when it is, because there's only 2 seasons here, wet and dry. And as far as what's going on, Guy McPherson told me a decade ago, Ecuador's not going to get hot, but it'll get a lot wetter. Well, it sure was. Last spring, the water came down the mountains, went under the blacktop roadways, and tore them up. We couldn't get to the big city for a long time, several months. That reminds me, I think I better write that down so I can get there before it. Well, never mind. Anyway, we couldn't. And it taught us a heavy lesson. It taught us a lesson in the fact that the climate is changing. And it taught us a lesson in the fact that everybody around here recognizes it. But most of the people I talk to, because I'm on Deep Adaptation and Collapse Club and several different options within that for different meetings that talk about what is going on. And it's pretty dire. But we have to have hope. We have to have hope. Now, Guy McPherson will tell you there isn't any hope, but he also says live your life. So I'm sitting here to tell you that you need to discipline yourself to have some hope every day. A little hope. You need to think about things before you buy whatever it might be. Maybe it's a toaster oven. How long do toaster ovens last? Figure it out. Maybe you need to go on a vacation. Go. Maybe you'd like to send your kids to a special school for a camp for the summer. Do it. Anything that you're dreaming of, which is a hope, take the discipline within you to do it as quick as you can. Because we don't know. We really don't know. I mean, March is next, and that could be just like last year. By May, we couldn't go to the city for anything because it was all blocked off with landslides, roads torn up. We don't know. So it's about creating the discipline to look at our world a little differently and pull our hope gauge in a little closer. I hope I can have lunch with my friend Millie on Tuesday. That's pretty close. That's okay. But do I hope that my great-granddaughter can graduate from Yale with a PhD in whatever she wants? I better not go there. I have to use the discipline to recognize that we are in an unprecedented, and you've heard that word before because that's been used so many times. not only with the climate, but with our democracy in the United States, with our leaders all over the world, with our currency issues. I mean, there's all kinds of issues with whose money's going to go up, whose money's going to go down, who's going to get paid, who's not going to get paid, what's running out, what isn't running out. Is it crypto? Is it... and the very wealthy are getting very wealthier. If you want to go to the beach this weekend, go. Make the memories. Force yourself to create the discipline to make the memories that you want to make and not put them off, because we really don't know. And we need to take that to heart. It doesn't mean we don't have any hope. It just means that long-term hope needs to be pulled back. And how do we talk to our kids? Well, that's really hard. It's really hard, because the time between one Christmas and another for a child is an eternity. For me, it's 3.5 days. Okay? The older you get, the faster Christmas rolls around, is what I'm trying to get across to you. So you don't want to be lying to your child. I know you don't. But you don't also want to assure them on things that very likely are going to change. Now, we don't know how hard it's going to change. We don't know what kind of destruction is going to occur, what kind of obstacles are going to get in the pathway of making a clear trip from one way to the other. But what we do know, absolutely, is that we are in the midst of change. Things are changing. There's no question about it. But one part that makes me so incredibly sad is that FEMA had been cut back a lot, and the phones weren't being answered, and that part of the government had changed a great deal on July 3rd of 2025, when an enormous amount of water came through Camp Mystic in Texas, and the lives of many children and some adults were lost. You know, I went to church camp, I went to Girl Scout camp, Brownie camp. Well, Brownie, we just stayed in somebody's house overnight, but Girl Scout camp, Senior Scout camp. I loved camping. I loved being in church camp. Any of that was... It was the hope I always had. Oh, I hope I can go this summer. Can I go this summer? Can I go over Christmas break? Yeah, that was me. I drove my parents crazy because I loved to camp. I just loved to camp. I've done lots and lots of camping in my life. And right now what I'm doing is glamour camping, because that's what it amounts to when you live on a farm. You're sort of camping, but you at least get to go in the house to sleep. We just have to recognize that if the child wants to go, we really should let them go now, because we really don't know what's going to happen. They keep saying, wow, we thought this and that would thaw, or this and that would happen, and this is faster ahead than it was, and that didn't happen the way we thought it would. It just goes on and on and on of reports that supposedly are very, very bad and very, very concerning. And then other reports of, well, it didn't quite happen the way we thought. What matters is adapting. That's where the discipline comes in. You're going to have to adapt to the changes that you really can't predict. You just can't. We don't have enough information. One of the ones they keep talking about is AMOC. Don't ask me what it stands for. AMOC is when the water that comes through the Arctic and gets cold and then comes down into the lower part of the world and moves around is supposed to determine some of our climate differences. And somehow it's not moving around the way it's supposed to. If you look it up under AMOC, you'll probably find it pretty easily. I have many times and looked at it and wondered. But they do explain it a whole lot better than I do. But the point is the water is moving from the cold areas to the south areas and a normal pace. It's something that's been expected for a long time. It's something that the animals expect to happen. The coral expects to happen. The fish expect to happen. The people expect to happen. And now they're saying that that's changed so much that Europe may turn into an ice age. And who knows, at some point. The point I'm trying to make is bring a level of discipline into your life regarding hope. Because if you don't, you're going to be terribly, terribly, terribly disappointed if things go in the way that some have predicted they could. And you don't want to let that happen. You don't want to miss out on something that was important to you, or something that was important for your children, or an opportunity that's not going to come up again. Do yourself a favor. Keep it not in the front of your mind. You don't want to be sad all the time, but keep it in the back of your mind. That's what discipline is. Discipline is when you automatically don't slurp your food, or you automatically brush your teeth. How you eat a meal and how you brush your teeth is something you've done so much that you do it from habit. Let the discipline be like that. Let it go in a little bit in the back, but don't lose the hope. Because there are things that you can do before we have challenges that you're going to be glad you did. Down in the description, you can ask me any questions you'd like. And if you want to check out our website, you can see what my nonprofit has been doing for the last 34 years. And you can see some of the art we have down there too. Thank you.